Story continued from Fly Like a Leo playlist. The wet season has arrived, and the dry landscape has received its long-awaited rain, soaking the earth and growing the thirsty plant life. For the animals in this part of Australia, it is a time of plenty, and a time to reproduce. The female Fly Like a Leo is on the lookout for a mate. Though she will not actively search for a male, the males of her species will be looking for her, and she may have multiple suitors during this period, if she finds any of them up to scratch. Any unsuitable males she will chase off, and they will have to try their luck with other females, which will be tens of kilometers away. Though she hasn't interacted with any males yet, and having recently eaten her fill, is now walking down to one of the many ponds in her territory. With the recent rains, the pond is much larger now, and multiple species of water birds are taking advantage of various amphibians and fish that have come out with the wet season. A great egret takes long steps across the shallow water looking for fish. A darter sits on a log with its wings outstretched, drying them off in the sun, and in the distance a small group of royal spoonbills glide their beaks through the water's surface. The Fly Like a Leo makes her way to the water's edge, parting the tall grass in her path, and stepping through the toe-deep water. As soon as she gets to where the water is deep enough, she lowers her head and laps up the water. Her kind has evolved to go long stretches without drinking, to survive the harsh dry seasons and droughts that occur, but when the going is good, she won't pass up a decent drink. After having her fill, she shakes her head and yawns, widening her jaws, exposing her fearsome teeth. Then she turns and heads back the way she came, hoping to find a tree to climb and sleep in. She isn't even back on dry land when she hears chirping close by, not being made by any of the resident water birds. Out of curiosity, she rears up onto her hind legs and uses her tail as a brace, in order to see what was making the noise. Looking through the tall grass, the female assumes it is the chicks of some sort of bird. She is correct, though she can't see them over the tall grass. She can see the parents. Standing nearly 2.5 meters tall, striding through the grass on long, powerful legs with a tall, crushing beak, is Dromornis. Not just one, but two, a duo of protective parents guarding their brood of recently hatched chicks. These enormous birds are part of a family that has lived in Australia for 25 million years. They may appear similar to their neighbours, the emu or cassowary, but they are more closely related to the waterfowl, and have a similar short temper. Fortunately, they are herbivores, feeding on everything from leaves to nuts, and that is why they are here, to graze on some of the softer aquatic flora that will be easier for their young to eat. Dromornis can weigh up to 250 kilos, making them some of the heaviest birds to have ever lived. And when that weight is thrown behind their broad beaks, they can deliver vicious blows to anything they deem as a threat. The young are still covered in a simple down, and will have the protection of their parents for a few years, though they won't reach maturity till they are 10. The Fly Like a Leo lowers herself and remains still, not wanting to alarm the Dromornis family. They are not animals that she would usually hunt, as she mostly goes after medium to large marsupials. But if she did want one, she would much prefer to hunt one of the young. The adults were another story. They were far taller than her, and she had seen their kind get into fights with thylacines, crocs, and even megalania. They didn't always win, but their aggression and tenacity were the reason they were called demon ducks. She had been chased off by a pair of black swans once, and couldn't imagine being pecked by any bird with a beak of that size. The family seemed preoccupied as both the parents routinely lower their heads and pull some reeds out of the river and place it down in the shallower section where their young can feed. The male finds some sort of hard nut, lifts it up, tosses it further back along his beak, and with minimal effort, crushes it into pieces before swallowing the contents. The Fly Like a Leo slowly sneaks away, trying to make as little noise as possible, but her feet squelch in the muddy terrain, and as she turns her head to look behind her, she sees the female Dromornis is looking over the grass right at her. The giant bird lets out a piercing screech and runs towards the predator, its small wings flapping sporadically. The Thylacoleo breaks into a sprint, crashing through the tall grass looking for the closest tree that is high enough for her to get out of the reach of the tall bird. Behind her, the Dromornis pounds after her, its footfalls causing water to spray in all directions. It angrily honks at her, but it doesn't seem like any amount of distance will make the mother stop the chase. The Thylacoleo runs to the base of a tree and jumps onto its trunk, her claws digging into the bark as she climbs. She gets about 2 meters up when the Dromornis catches her and bites her on the rear. The marsupial hisses in surprise and grips the tree as the bird shakes her head trying to dislodge her. She can't claw at her attacker, as she would lose her grip, and so she swings her head from side to side while crying out, fruitlessly trying to scare off the enraged mother. Her grip wins out, as the Dromornis's beak slides off her rear and she climbs further up the tree out of the giant bird's reach. As she crawls onto a branch, the Dromornis is still shrieking at her. Now out of harm's way, and with a bruised backside, the marsupial lion has had enough and lets out her own roar, a harsh, throaty hiss that she rarely uses. After the two species stare each other down for a while, the Dromornis eventually backs away and returns to her mate and chicks, who are moving away from the pond. Because of their height and her vantage point, the Thylacoleo can see them above the foliage for a long time, and as she tracks them, the Dromornis pair keep looking back to make sure she is still in her tree. They were one of the few herbivores that she considered to be more trouble than they were worth, and so with a sore backside, she secured herself in the tree branch and went to sleep. Hello fellow travellers and welcome back. Today we will be breaking down the family of birds known as the demon ducks, Dromornithinidae. Dromornithinidae are a group known only from Australia, and the first remains discovered by Europeans was by Thomas Mitchell, and would be described in 1872 by Richard Owen. This first species was named Dromornis australis, and since then 8 species in 4 genera have been named, found in various locations across Australia. Dromornithinidae have been known by many different names. You may have heard them referred to as thunderbirds, demon ducks, and even giga geese. This is not just due to their size, but where they fit on the bird family tree. Though they may seem to be similar to other large flightless birds such as emus, ostriches, and moa, those are all part of the ratite family, being more closely related to the kiwi than to Dromornithinidae. No, Dromornithinidae is actually part of the Anseriformes family, more commonly known as waterfowl, so more closely related to ducks, geese, and swans, with their closest living relatives being the South American screamers and the Australian magpie goose. They are also not too distantly related from the extinct Gastornis family, from the Northern Hemisphere, that also grew to large sizes. In general, Dromornithinidae species are large flightless birds with strongly built bodies, thick powerful legs that lack talons on the toes, robust and often tall skulls and beaks that lack hooked ends, indicating they were mostly herbivorous. They range in heights from 1.5 meters to 3 meters tall. They lived in the Oligocene to the Pleistocene, between 25 million and 30,000 years ago. There are 4 genera: Dromornis, that contain 4 species, Ibanodornis, that have 2 species, and Genyornis and Barawertornis, that have 1 species each. In this episode, I will be covering the Dromornis genus, and we'll do a follow-up episode on the other 3 genera later on, so stay tuned for that video. Dromornis australis was the first species discovered, and is known from one femur, found in Peak Downs, Queensland. Though it has traits of 2 other members of its family, it is still considered its own species. If it is unique, it would mean the Dromornis genus was able to survive into the Pleistocene. Dromornis morai, also found in Queensland, was named in 2016, and is the oldest member of the family, having lived during the Oligocene to the early Miocene. The fossil mostly consists of leg and cranial bones, Going off of these, it was estimated to have stood 1.5 meters tall, but would have weighed up to 250 kilograms, with wings only 10 to 15 centimeters long. The authors also noted that it had a rather small brain case. To quote the description's leading author, Trevor Worthy, "I mean, if a chicken was silly, these things were very much more silly." God, I love Aussie science. Dromornis plani, also known as Bullocornis, was first discovered at Bullock Creek in the Northern Territory in 1971, and lived around 15 million years ago. It stood 2.5 meters tall, and weighed 250 kilograms, with a large skull similar in size to a horse's. The discovery of the skulls helped to better understand the diet of these birds, and led to the theory that they were herbivores. It was also discovered that plani, like other large flightless birds, had a sternum that wasn't keeled. Dromornithinidae as a group don't have this, as they are flightless and don't need the attachments of large flight muscles on their chests. The environment it lived in was a seasonal floodplain with sedges and scrubs, and it was found alongside other megafauna. Dromornis sturtoni was discovered in 1979 in the Alcota fossil bed in the Northern Territory. It was the largest of the family, reaching up to 3 meters in height and weighing over 500 kilograms. This makes it a contender for the largest bird ever to have lived, rivaling the elephant bird from Madagascar. The remains collected have allowed scientists to see that Dromornis storni have clear sexual dimorphism between males and females. Females were smaller, weighing between 440 and 450 kilos, while the males were larger, weighing between 530 and 580 kilos, though they weren't much taller than the females, but stockier. Finding both genders together has led scientists to believe that, like many of its modern relatives, Sturoni likely mated for life, and may have behaved in similar ways, such as parental care, aggression while nesting and rearing its young, elaborate courtship displays, being aggro for absolutely no reason, etc. Sturtoni's skull alone was half a meter long, with 2/3 of that being the beak, which was narrow but deep, the front half of which was used for slicing, while the back half was used for crushing. Though it's likely they were herbivores, as their beaks are flat and don't have a hook, which is seen in carnivorous birds. They also lack claws on their feet, instead having hoof-like nails that were evolved to help support its weight. With that being said, most animals we think of as being herbivorous do actually feed on meat on occasion, so it's entirely likely that Dromornithinidae in general did scavenge or go after small prey on occasion. Taking a look at the legs, we can see they were absolutely massive, especially when compared to emus and ostriches. These have strong muscle attachments that would have made them formidable creatures, capable of powerful kicks. It was originally thought that because of this, they would have been slow and cumbersome, but biomechanical analysis has shown that they were capable of running quite fast, though not as efficiently as emus and ostriches, which are evolved for high speed. We don't have anything quite like the Dromornithinidae family today. They are effectively the tank build of the birds. And this was probably so they could stand toe-to-toe with the many predators that it lived alongside, from marsupial carnivores to giant lizards and both aquatic and terrestrial crocodiles. It's likely that if they couldn't outrun their predators, they could fight them off with their huge beaks and oversized legs. However, the genus was one of many that went extinct during the Ice Ages. The lands became drier and droughts got worse, with most megafauna disappearing one by one. The Dromornis genus may have died out because its food sources dwindled and it had to compete with other herbivores that were better suited for this harsher climate. Plus, being so large meant they needed far more to keep going than their smaller, more lightly built cousins. Another factor is reproduction and aging. Dromornis is estimated to have taken 10 years to reach full size, whereas emus reach full size in 6 months, and may stay with their father for up to a year. If it took a decade for these birds to reach maturity, they likely couldn't repopulate fast enough in their changing world. Though other members of the family would survive longer, but I will cover them in a future episode. So, the Dromornis genus. The idea of a 3-meter tall, half-a-ton bird with the aggression of a goose sprinting at you should obviously scare the life out of you. They are another example of how absolutely insane prehistoric Australia was, and I hope this video creates a clearer image of what it was like back then. I also hope you'll join me when I cover the remaining 4 species later. But what do you think of the Dromornis? And for my question of the week, do you think they had beautiful feathers like modern geese and swans, or had feathers more like the ratites? What lesser known extinct bird would you like me to do a breakdown on next? And until then, please like, share, subscribe, and thank you for watching. Remember the magpie goose mentioned earlier? Well, I've been bitten on the hand by one of those, and it hurt like hell. The thought of one of those, but with a beak like an industrial press, and built like a theropod? No thanks. I don't want none of that. Absolutely not, mate.